Let us have the discussion with Patrick Coffin. He is the author of Sex Au Naturel. I got to get this subtitle, what it is and why it's good for your marriage. He was on the, for 8 years, he was on the top-rated Catholic Answers Live apologetics radio program. You can find him now at patrickcoffin.net. There's a podcast there, and on YouTube, it's patrickcoffin.media. Patrick, there you are. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Andrew. I was just filling out a few platonic forms.
I have to apologize for promoting you to priest yesterday.
Oh, it happens all the time. It's my natural grace. And, Pope Francis just this morning told me that name dropping is totally inappropriate. So it's like,
he called me. He said, he wanted me to make you a priest. But
I'm the only one he hasn't called.
So to start out with, I am fairly liberal, live and let live, don't scare the horses about sexual issues. At the same time, I do look at some of this transgender stuff. And when I see people in mainstream venues recommending that you butcher your children, if little Timmy plays with a doll, cut him to pieces and inject him with hormones, right. I see this, and I do have this sense that the left, at least, or a large portion of the left, has gone insane on sexual matters. And there is this feeling of that people have lost their minds on this question of sex. And I would like to know, before we start talking about the book, which we will, but I would like to know, where do you think this starts? Why do you think this has spun so far out of control?
That's the question to be asked and framed, and I appreciate your time here on your show, Andrew. I was delighted to have you on mine, so this is a lot of fun, so thank you. I think we need to take a look from 50,000 feet above the tarmac and go back to the summer of 1930. In 1930, in August, the Anglican bishops met, and as Anglican bishops do, they produced a document that not a lot of people paid attention to, but it did include one reference to contraception. And at that Lambeth Conference in 1930, for the very first time in all of Christian history, their excellencies made an exception only within marriage and only in extraordinary circumstances could a man and a woman prevent the coming to be of a new human being. Well, within 10 years, all of mainline, old line Protestantism had collapsed, and this deep fissure within the Christian world began. So where is this going? Well, with the acceptance of the divorce between love and life, which is represented by contraception, the logic there is inexorable. It's going to catch up with you. If it's okay to thwart the act by which new human life is created, then all bets are off. In fact, Sigmund Freud noted this in 1920. He gave a lecture in Vienna that you can look up. It's in a collection of his talks. And he said it's the mark of sexual perversion that it sets aside reproduction as an aim. So Freud, last time
I saw this in the book, in Sex Au Naturel. I saw it in the book, and I was stunned that Freud said that.
Yeah, and so did Mahatma Gandhi in the 20s was saying the same thing, that contraception was going to reap a whirlwind of abuse toward women. It would increase lust in the world. It would see women as instruments for men's pleasure, and they would begin to be used. And so once you take apart that most fundamental aspect of what a human person is, we're built to be with others, and the ultimate inbuilt union is between a man and a woman through sexual union. And this is why our genitals are called genitals. They generate new life. So we say, kind of casually, oh, human life is sacred. If that's true, then the means of transmitting that life is in also some sense sacred. So once you disassemble such a basic building block of human life, then of course you're gonna challenge other basics like, what's my sex? What's my gender? Can I go from one to the other? What would be wrong with any kind of sexual union? And so now you have 500,000 or so polyamorous couples. They want the definition of marriage to extend to polyamorous couples. There's groups in Canada and in the Netherlands that want to remove the taboos toward bestiality. I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
The headlines now used to be called onion parody headlines. So I think the trans confusion, which by the way afflicts about 1/3%
yes, that's not
of the population. So when the celebrities have this collective paroxysm of nausea at President Trump's very sensible policy, the numbers don't bear the emoting. Right, it's a very, very small sliver.
Now, let me ask you this, because I mean, you must know that in the world today, you actually sound, what you're saying is radical. I mean, most people would look at you, especially people who are younger, and who grew up with birth control as just a natural thing that was there. They're going to look at you and you say you're radical. So let's, for the sake of argument, let's eliminate the extremes for a minute. Let's eliminate the crazies and just say, well, what's wrong with gay people being free? What's wrong with people having a few sexual encounters that don't produce children before they get married? What is wrong with the freedom that birth control provides and that the new sexual freedom provides?
Well, the freedom mantra is the main slogan by which birth control was sold in the 60s. It was going to usher in a new era of freedom, that women would be able to pursue whatever they wanted, and marriages would become happy, and people would be, quote unquote, free. No one ever defines freedom anymore. And not only do they not define the thing they think it's going to make them happy, things nowadays don't have any meanings. Sex doesn't have a meaning anymore. Even the fact that we're having this conversation is probably looked at as odd by some
bizarre. Yeah, no, some of the stuff you're saying I know sounds bizarre to younger people.
Right. But let's look at a different body part. Let's take it out of the sexual realm altogether. The eyes are made for something. An atheist has to admit that there's an inbuilt purpose to the human eye. It's to see things, especially beautiful things. The ears have a purpose. It's to hear things, especially words like I love you. The lungs have a purpose. It's to oxygenate blood. The heart has a purpose to pump blood through the body. So if you damage your eyes, that's wrong, because your eyes have an inbuilt purpose. You are undermining the purpose for which the thing is made. The great Thomas Aquinas said that you can't know what a thing is until you know what it's for. So if you want to remove nails, you reach for a hammer, because that's what the hammer's for. So obviously you can see where the spear is going to land. Translating this line of thinking into the sexual sphere means that sex has a purpose. And any educated 12-year-old knows what that purpose is. It's twofold. As Dr. Janet Smith says, sex is for babies and for bonding. Babies and bonding. Now, it can have other purposes. For instance, a couple can get married at the age of 89, and so the procreative aspect is not going to be in play there. But they're not undermining it. They're not thwarting it. And that's the heart of contraception. Contraception, actually, Andrew, has nothing to do with sex, per se. If I'm an evil mayor and I want to control the population of my town, I could add an additive into the water that would sterilize the men. I would be the contraceptor in that town, because I would be undermining sexual acts. Mm-hmm. In this case, it wouldn't be mine. It would be the citizens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know. I see what you're saying. I have a couple of questions that immediately spring to mind. I want to put them before you so that people don't feel that they weren't addressed. What about you said that somebody could have, an older marriage could have. What about the fact that even though things have uses, sometimes creative people find other uses for them? My feet are for standing and walking, but gymnasts hang by them when they are doing, when they're doing their routines. We find medicines that were created for one thing but can be used for another. Obviously, people get a lot of fun out of sex, and in the context of marriage, especially where you're not spreading disease and you're not destroying people's lives. What is wrong with doing things that, having sexual acts that turn you on but don't have the possibility of creating life?
Well, that is it's a box with the word Pandora on the side, because where does it end? Where does that line of thinking get you? It gets you unable to oppose any kind of sexual union. For instance, what would be wrong with sex with a goat? Now, by saying that, people go, "Oh, he's insane. He just brought the word goat in here." But if reproduction is set aside as an aim, then all bets are off. Why couldn't anybody at any time for any reason just masturbate all day? Or why couldn't they lust after someone else who's not their spouse? Well, see, it's not that there's only one purpose. In fact, there's comfort. Obviously, there's pleasure. There's union. There's relief. They're all those things. But the thing that makes it what it is, its inbuilt purpose. I haven't even brought God into it. The thing that makes it what it is the possibility of new human life and the union of a man and a woman. Because otherwise, without contraception, you have no pornography industry. If you look at the mainstreamization of porn, it began post-1965. Before 1965, it was illegal to sell or advertise contraceptives in the United States. And the Griswold versus Connecticut decision produced this penumbra, as the justices of Roe v. Wade said, known as the right to privacy. So when the right to privacy was introduced into American life, well, obviously, if sex is shorn from conception, why can't you masturbate? Why do we have to have a porn industry stuck in one part of the town? And so you have the introduction of pubic hair in 1969 in Playboy. And within years, a couple of years anyway, you've got a whole industry of glossy magazines that did not exist 10 years prior. And now, I mean, the whole world's pornified. And that was given jet fuel by the contraceptive mentality, that sex is for whatever I want it to be for.
There's no question that the world is pornified. I have to say that even I, who don't pay attention to this, I walk down the streets of New York and I start to think God, but there's something buzzing in my head. What is it? It's that every poster has a naked woman on it as you're walking along, and it gets you. It gets into your mind. But there does seem to be. I mean, you put a couple of things together there, like having sex with a goat, which seems to me wrong because the goat has no say. The goat has no will in the act, so it's kind of you're raping an animal. But then you talk about masturbation. I think, what business is that of mine? Now you talk about, even when it comes to a loving relationship between two gay people, you say, what are they doing wrong? I mean, who are they harming? And I guess that's where that is the question in a free society that keeps coming up, and that keeps, the way the news media keeps from discussing this is appealing to that sense of freedom that Americans love so much. So that we don't discuss the kind of issues that you're discussing right now. So what is wrong with an act that doesn't hurt anybody and is done with consent?
That's a very good question. And I think sometimes some forms of harm are hard to prove. They're even hard to admit. I've learned a lot from a guy named Joseph Chambra. Joseph Chambra is an ex-gay porn star. Really dark satanic activity, the full Castro San Francisco life, and he left it. And he writes about the harm that that whole scene wrought in the lives of not just him, but the many friends that he had in the past, because they passed away from AIDS. So I think it depends on who you're paying attention to about what harm sexual misbehavior can bring to someone. And let's face it, God is a genius. Sex feels really, really good. Yeah. He doesn't put redundant things in there. In fact, the very first commandment, I say this in the book, Sex au Naturel, the first commandment was not, I'm the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods beside me. The first commandment is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. Do it. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill, not partially, fill the earth and multiply. And then he says it again to Noah in Genesis 9. He says it again in Genesis chapter 35. So God's pro-sex, definitely. And so we're prone to auto-kiddery. Okay, we all do this because we want what its pleasures bring us. We don't want anything that's going to impede what I want for myself right now. And I admit that some of the harms here are difficult to discern because we have a vested interest in not wanting to look at it because it's so pleasurable and so immediate.
Well, then let's put it in the positive side. And again, the book is Sex au Naturel, what it is and why it's good for your marriage. Sex au Naturel is basically, I should let you define it.
Sure.
What does that mean exactly?
I stole it without shame, but I admitted it in the intro. It's a line from Federica Matthews Green, who's an Orthodox writer and NPR commentator. And the French term au naturel is a kind of a poetic way of saying nude. You're naked. They swam au naturel meant they skinny dipped. So sex au naturel is sex without the intrusion of any chemical, of any barrier, of any withdrawal, of any truncation of what it means. And that's the heart of the biblical ancient Christian insight into sexual intercourse. Because sexual intercourse is what it is, whether or not it produces children. If I playing baseball and I see the pitch coming in from the pitcher and I swing, just because I didn't connect and hit a home run doesn't mean I wasn't doing the baseball thing. So there's a meaning in itself to sexual intercourse. And sex au naturel is my witty way of summarizing that sexual union should be truly romantic and without the fear-based language of protection, which is the heart of contraception.
Okay, I have two last questions. One is that one of them I meant to ask you before, and it slipped my mind. What about the objection that you look in so many places where people don't have a lot of money and sex is one of their main forms of condolence and entertainment, and they have too many kids and they can't afford the kids. It becomes a Jew the obscure situation. We are too many. What do you say to them? I mean, what does the Catholic Church or you personally have to say to them?
Well, the Church does not condemn spacing your births. Every month, the woman is fertile for one day, the day of ovulation, and it's if you have a grave reason or a serious or just reason to delay pregnancy, even indefinitely, if it's in the case of a medical condition that might make pregnancy dangerous, you can avoid intercourse on those days. It's called natural family planning, and it's 98% plus effective in preventing pregnancy. But what you're never doing is you're never interrupting the meaning of sex itself. You're simply expressing your love in a non-genital way. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, no, I get the answer. I'm running out of time, and the last thing I want to ask you is, why is this good for your marriage?
Oh, it's good for your marriage because couples who contracept can much more easily hide behind sex. They can throw sex at a problem. If you're not using contraception, so you have no birth and no control, which is what really the hidden meaning of the phrase birth control, which, by the way, is that phrase came from Margaret Sanger, by the way, a brilliant polemicist and propagandist. So with no birth and no control, it's just the adventure of true love. And every month you have this conversation with your spouse. Are we ready for a new baby? What would a new baby look like in this house? We already have too much chaos. We got 3 kids. Forget it. Let's just go for 4. Couples who use natural family planning have a very close to 0 divorce rate. This was verified by Robert Lerner of the University of Chicago. Dr. Yosef Rotzer tracked 1,400 couples over 20 years who all had one thing in common. They used natural family planning to space their births. Over 20 years, 1,400 couples had a 0 divorce rate.
Cool stuff.
So it has a data-driven success for marital longevity and happiness.
Patrick, thank you very much for coming on. This is really interesting. People can find you at patrickcoffin.net and patrickcoffin.media. Anywhere else they can find you?
Correct. .net is where they can get a signed copy. This week is the anniversary of Humanae Vitae, which was the 1968 encyclical on this whole matter. Very short document. So if you go to the .net site, patrickcoffin.net, and when you get to the checkout, the coupon HV for Humanae Vitae, HV20 gets you 20% off. And I'll even sign it. And for an extra fee, I'll sign it Andrew Klavan.
Patrick, it's great talking to you. I hope you'll come back. Sex au Naturel, really interesting book and a good read. Thanks for coming on.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
All right, really interesting. And I have this thing that I've been wrestling with about this, the issue, because, when Patrick talks about, he was talking about some of the stuff that we talk about here, which is teleology, the purpose of things, the reason for things. And this is where the natural law of the Catholic Church comes from, and the natural law of thinkers throughout the Western tradition. I have some problems with it. It seems to me a gay guy in a straight marriage is being untrue to something in himself, even though he is also deviating from what he's talking about, the purpose of sexuality. And it seems to me that a married couple who enjoy doing things that don't lead to procreation are just cementing a bond between two people, which I think is a pleasure and a delight, and shouldn't be haunted by guilt. I mean, these are things that seem to me to have a new way of addressing natural law that takes into account individualism. That is kind of what I'm looking for.